Movietone Reviews 1948. Recalled by Lionel GAMLIN. How will the history books remember 1948? As a milestone in British history, it may go down as the birth year of Prince Charles of Edinburgh, who may someday be king. Many of us will recall it with pleasure as the silver wedding year of King George VI and Queen Elizabeth. Or less happily as the year of the King's illness. But our prayer is, may they live to celebrate their golden wedding. And may the King's recovery be swift. In America, it was Truman's year.
Senator Barkley and I will win this election and make these Republicans like it. Don't you forget that.
Against every expectation and forecast, the president secured his re-election by his own almost unaided efforts and carried the Democratic Party to a majority in both houses of Congress. In sport, there were the test matches. In spite of valiant cricket by Dennis Compton, England took a bad beating, for with the ball as well as the bat, Australia had the distinct edge of us. Still, there was some grand sport, and Bradman was not always not out. The season culminated in his announcement of retirement from Test cricket.
I feel that in my own case, and I think I'm probably the best judge of the many little creaks and groans that go on in my joints throughout the day, especially when we're out in the field. And I'm quite sure I shall have no regrets at all in having to sit in the pavilion and watch the other fellows.
This year we must omit all other sport and concentrate on the Olympics, which were the highlight of 1948, both because they will not be held in Britain for another long period of time and because they were in fact a great success. There were some tremendous finishes, as in the men's Open 100, won by the American Negro Dillard on the extreme left. Though his teammate Ewell evidently thought he was the victor. Now and then decisions were disputed, but always happily adjusted, as in the 400 metres relay, where it was said that Ewell had overrun the line when handing on the baton. The film record vindicated the correctness of the Americans' handover. Amazing individual performances included that of the Dutchwoman Fanny Blankers-Koen, who won 3 events, including the 80 metres hurdles. In this event, both she and the English girl Maureen Gardner broke the record, and the spectators couldn't tell which of the two had won until the result was posted. Yes, emphatically, the 14th modern Olympiad was a success. Turn now to sterner international contests. In UNO, the division between Russia and the Western nations deepened. The Soviet took objection to the Marshall Plan, which was embraced by 16 countries meeting in Paris. From the plan came Marshall aid given by the United States under the name of the European Recovery Program. Berlin then became the battleground. Incidents at the rendezvous of the British, American and Russian sectors were the first sign. When the Western Allies introduced their own currency into their sectors, the Soviets seized the excuse to try to force them to evacuate the German capital. Eventually, with the cutting of all road and rail transport, the only channel of supply became the air corridor. The prodigious feat of supplying 3 million people solely by air fell to the RAF and the American Air Force. Meanwhile, 5 nations entered into a pact of Western Union: Britain, France, Belgium, Holland and Luxembourg. Field Marshal Montgomery was named as Defence Chief of the Combined Forces. The Berlin controversy was carried to UNO's meeting in Paris, where Wyszynski exercised Russia's 28th veto to prevent a decision in the Security Council. progress of communism in Europe was checkered and to some degree checked. From the Italian elections, the Christian Democrats emerged victorious. Togliatti, the communist leader, survived an attempt to assassinate him and lives to fight again. But in Czechoslovakia, communists inside the government seized power by the well-known technique of intimidation, and the country became a police state and Russian satellite under Premier Gottwald. President Beneš, that great Democrat, died, heartbroken no doubt by these disastrous events. But in Yugoslavia, Tito suddenly became defiant and refused to take his orders from the Cominform. Palestine remained a knotty problem, but became the responsibility of UNO instead of Britain. The Jews proved themselves readier than the Arabs to profit by the British withdrawal. In the fighting for Jerusalem, the old city was captured by the Arab Legion. Elsewhere, the troops of the new Israel prevailed. A truce was negotiated by the United Nations mediator, Count Bernadotte, and he was engaged on plans for a permanent settlement when the crime of his assassination horrified all civilized people. Not only Sweden, but the whole world mourned the tragic fate of a peacemaker. Assassination was the fate of another peacemaker earlier in the year. Gandhi had been fasting in the cause of reconciliation between India and Pakistan when he was struck down by a fanatical young Hindu. The grief expressed over Gandhi's burning gut was not confined to Hindu India. Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan, also died, and the passing of these experienced statesmen increased the delicacy of the relationship between the two new dominions. There had been troubles in Kashmir, where India supported the Maharaja. Now arose difficulties with Hyderabad, where India's troops moved in against the Nizam's government. Burma was set up as a completely independent country in January. Civil war has been the rule rather than the exception of this young republic, and assassins have struck down several members of the government to whom Mr. Attlee handed over at 10 Downing Street.
Of the people of Burma, and we accept their decision.
Ceylon, on the other hand, elected to stay within the empire for the time being and became a dominion. Her Prime Minister, Mr. Senanayake, attended the Commonwealth Conference held in London during October. Mr. Liaquat Ali Khan of Pakistan and Mr. Nehru of India, on the right, were also notable figures at this conference, in whose report the word British for the first time was dropped before Commonwealth. In Era, Mr. Costello's government decided to declare a republic, while Smuts' defeat in South Africa made the future policy of the Union uncertain. On the credit side for the empire, the African Conference should perhaps be mentioned. Mr. Strachey's groundnut scheme in Tanganyika made some progress and was personally visited by him in the harvest season. At home, food, as usual, remained an absorbing topic, and rations went up and down and down and up. The basic petrol ration, which had been cut in 1947, was restored under a new name, Standard. The biggest political sensation was the Board of Trade Inquiry, of which Mr. Belcher was the central figure. The government's nationalisation of the railways took effect in 1948. Its other nationalised undertakings encountered some squalls. There was a sensation over the dismissal of Air Vice Marshal Bennett from British South American Airways. The resignation of Sir Charles Reed revealed lack of harmony on the National Coal Board. Undeterred by such teething troubles, the government decided to confront Parliament with the nationalisation of iron and steel. And so there's going to be plenty of controversy in 1949, both at home and abroad. Furnaces are tapped and the slag of argument is poured off, and what emerges? Government steel or the metal of private enterprise? Well, it's time to turn the page of history into 1949.